Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Brandon. I'm from Alation. Welcome to Data Governance with our guest Forrester, Stories from the Trenches. I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll jump into it, and I'll hand it off, and we'll jump into our agenda and get started with the program. So there will be a Q&A for the panel at the end of the event. In your Zoom toolbar down at the bottom, you should see a Q&A button. Go ahead and click that and type your questions into there. That way we can make sure that our panelists are seeing your questions and we can get your questions answered at the end of the program. If you have any technical issues, you can message me. Again, my name is Brandon Paskey through the chat. It's probably under Alation Marketing Team. So go ahead and message me if you have any technical issues, and I'll happy to help you out. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Miles to go through our agenda and introduce our speakers.
Hi, I'm Miles Sewer, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator for today. I'm really excited to start off this presentation with our guest speaker, Gene Laganza. I'll provide a quick introduction to him, and then we'll get into our panel discussion and obviously the Q&A for you. Gene is a Forrester Vice President and Research Director. I consider him a friend. We've gotten to work together multiple times. We both have a mutual love for enterprise architecture, and I believe TOGAF, but we haven't talked about that before. And I discovered today that we both have a love for music. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Gene to set up our discussion in terms of what are the trends in data governance.
Thank you, Miles. And hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm having trouble seeing the little arrows show up at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So maybe Miles, yeah, great. Thank you. And maybe I got them now. Okay. I don't know why. So I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm only going to talk about 20 minutes. We could talk about this stuff all day. I have like Miles, I have a love of a lot of this stuff, enterprise architecture as it applies to data solutions and data architectures in particular. I'm going to talk a bit about top focus areas in data management and data governance in general. Some of that is to kind of get you motivated to care about data governance, but given that the marketing material for this really highlighted data governance, and a lot of you registered, I have a feeling I don't really need to motivate you to hear what we have to say about data governance. So I'll try not to spend too much time on that. But I want to describe a bit about what data governance maturity levels are looking like these days, and how the population is shifting, and what that means for people who are actually trying to get this done and kind of make data governance and just becoming a more insights-driven organization real for them. And then I'm not going to pretend it's continuous, kind of discontinuously. At the very end, Miles thought it would be an interesting thing to look at the evaluation criteria that Forrester used to refresh our data governance solutions wave. They jumped into the technology. What can technology do for you from the point of view of where did our analysts who evaluated data governance tools, what did they look at specifically? What did they ask the vendors to tell us what they do and how they do it for us to pick out the differentiators and the folks who were in the lead? So moving on to these top focus areas, these hopefully will resonate with you. This is a combination of survey data. We do surveys once a year with about 3,000 people globally. And we change our schedule this year. It's actually, we're getting our data early November. So 2020 data is the latest I currently have. The 2021 data will be very fresh in about a month. But also inquiries from our users who ask us a lot of questions and various research projects. Democratizing analytics, data science, machine learning, advanced analytics, and of course, all the data activities behind all those things is a really big deal. And that's going to be the tip. Saying that is true is easy to say. That's the tip of the iceberg of what that implies. Also, effective storytelling with data is big. And that's kind of the flip side of the coin. If we democratize data and analytics so that everyone's doing it, I think everybody would see the value there. That's a struggle. People are on their journey there. For the folks who are doing data and analytics on behalf of other parts of the company in the enterprises you're at, they often find that people think you've got some interesting data and some interesting insights, but then they don't do anything about it. So a very popular set of workshops for us for data analysts is this notion of storytelling with data, which is a way of making the data insights real to people so they actually take action on the insights that you get from data, so it actually makes a difference to the business. And hand in glove with all that is improving data literacy across the organization, with the understanding that there are people at various levels, from data scientists to completely naive and actually data averse people. How do you kind of upskill and up level the whole organization to appreciate the value that data brings to the table for the organization to be more insights driven? Of course, what's very big is leveraging data and analytics to improve the customer experience, marketing, customer service, really everything, but there's a big focus on improving things from the customer's point of view these days. Building cross-functional data analytics and insights teams is difficult, which is why that's big. It's, as you'll see, it's part of what we describe as being a more mature, more effective organization. And really being cross-functional in your organization is largely an unnatural act for a lot of organizations. And so there's a lot of work to kind of make that happen, either on a temporary ad hoc basis or particularly on a more permanent ongoing basis. And of course, what everybody complains about at all maturity levels is that they have data silos that prevent them from really understanding customers, understanding what's going on in their business with their partners. And so breaking those silos down in order to scale insights to the enterprise is a key activity. And then there's some perennial also rants. Yes, people believe in AI and machine learning that can advance things, but where do you start? What are the right use cases to kind of look to get some traction, prove the concepts and move forward with it? And then architecture, things like moving data to the cloud and modernizing architectures and data platforms, of course, is always going to be on the list of things that are a concern. All this drives data governance activity. And it's driving a lot of investment. Like, I'm anxious to see our 2021 data. This came out in late 2020. And what we found is that everybody's upping their budget, right? This is like about 30% doing a 1 to 4% or a 5 to 10% increase in their budget. That's around 60%. And another 8% doing at least a 10% increase. That's well into the over 50%, over 60% range for people who are actually increasing their budget. You know, just because, I mean, people really see value. Basically, no matter where you are in the business, the light bulb's kind of going off. It used to be a thing where data architects, DBAs, data nerds everywhere would try to convince the business that there was a lot of value in their data assets. And if only the business people kind of played ball, if they lent the expertise of the subject matter experts to inform data quality, data governance processes, things would be much better. And there's been resistance for a long time, but that's been changing for quite a while now. I think the light bulb started going off a few years after the big data era kind of kicked off and people started hearing amazing stories about the possibilities with data. Basically, whether you're talking about internal processes, revenue growth, making the customer experience better, make customer service better, supply chain, everybody gets that now that we've kind of digitized much of the business, if not all of the business, that means there's a trail of breadcrumbs in the terms of data that can help us understand everything and therefore improve and optimize everything. So we have a survey that as I mentioned, we baked into a few years ago into that survey our maturity model for becoming an insights-driven business. And we look at things across 5 different dimensions. And you know, no big surprise, not that many people are advanced at the enterprise level across the board. Only for several years, we've been kind of stalled out at 7%. Around half are beginners and 43% are intermediate. Now, the good news here is that last year actually represented a change. For the first few years we did this, easily over 50% of folks ranked as beginners. And, you know, it's hard to move on from the beginning. You know, people were hiring chief data officers. They were really taking care of some real basic defensive remediation after ignoring data investments for a long time. They had to, you know, fix up bad data quality issues. They had to deal with a lot of compliance issues first. They had to kind of be defensive about what was broken before they kind of moved on to kind of getting to the fun stuff and the good stuff. But interesting thing happened last year. For the first time, we dropped from 56% beginners to 49%. So it's still around 50%, but I was really gratified to see that it notched. I can no longer say more than half of folks are beginners out there. We're just seeing the efforts being paid off after years of kind of changing the organization, investing in technology to see that we're getting into a large body of folks in the intermediate age where the game really starts to change. The story changes, what you pursue and where your priorities are changes a lot. We're still at 7% advanced, but that's not a big deal. There's a lot of meat in that in intermediate category that can make people's ability to be insights driven improved. And what you see across the bottom here is that this is what everybody complains about. It's interesting that you get different levels of responses to various survey questions when you compare beginners to advanced. However, everybody complains about data silos. Everybody complains about the difficulty and lack of collaboration between roles and organizations internally, and of the poor data quality is a problem we'll have forever. But these are all similar struggles, whether you're advanced or beginners, because it's something that is really just something that takes a lot of energy and work to kind of eradicate. So in terms of what does maturity look like, everybody's at this, at least data aware or aware that they should be data driven, and everybody has data and is getting signals out of it. I mean, who doesn't have a dashboard of some sort? Where things get difficult, where you start having to get into the intermediate level of maturity, is when you actually start getting legitimate bona fide insights. It's not just what was sales last quarter. It's actually using the data to have those aha moments. And that takes a bit more intermediate level maturity, because you've dealt more with more data sources, you've integrated it more, you've got more people looking at it and analyzing it, and you're starting to drive decisions. Fewer than in the low maturity stages are actually using it to make decisions, but even fewer are using it to drive actions. This is where that data storytelling thing comes in. Yeah, it might drive some decisions. How much does it actually drive actions that affect business outcomes? And then you start iterating at the very advanced level, where you're taking actions, you're observing the KPI change and the business outcomes, and you're iterating to kind of maximize the benefit of that change. Those are the people who are really good at this stuff, and those are the 7%. Those are the at least at the enterprise level. You can find this in pockets in some organizations at intermediate levels, but that's the goal. And it's like the components of the behaviors and the roles and the processes and the technology at these different levels is fairly significant. Now, this is the part I can skip over, because this is the part where I convince you that being insights driven has a lot of value. But a lot of research, when you correlate our advanced population to various benefits, there's basically significantly more revenue. So, IT costs are lower. Various things that you might complain about in a data estate things are just better in a more advanced organization. They're using analytics to increase company revenue. They're reporting that implementing big data solutions has going to improve the customer experience across the board. But since you're already here, you know that data governance is a good thing. So I don't think to convince you of this. There's just lots of correlations. And of course, it's a correlation. You're all data people. So I have to be careful to not let on that I think correlation is the same as causation. But the correlations between being intermediate and advanced and just the extreme positive outcomes from using data and analytics is pretty clear. It's pretty obvious, down to the bottom line. This is a slide with a lot of words. I'm not going to go over it a lot. Hopefully we can get these slides after and go over this, or get the Forrester report that this comes from. I just want to describe a little bit about what we think of as being kind of an advanced insights-driven business. First of all, the operating models are based on insights. This is not just we think it's a good idea to get more value of our data. We think we should base our operating model on what we find in insights from using data and analytics across the board. Insights, of course, must be actionable. An interesting point that nobody does anything about is worth absolutely nothing, and it's a waste of energy. So the focus on actionable insights is key. Learning and experimentation are continuous. That kind of goes along with that operating model based on insights. This is not something you do once and then you plan around it and act for a year. This is a continuous improvement, a continuous insight sort of thing. Investments in the capabilities to get these insights are strategic. That doesn't mean let's build a big data lake and see who comes. It's about understanding how your data assets and your activities around changing your organization are going to directly benefit aspects of your business strategy. It's keying in that strategy and making that your data architecture and data strategy relate to that. That's really kind of key to making this happen. It's not generic at all. It's very targeted and focused. And then finally, insights collection and implementation is a team sport. I'm going to keep coming back to this. And it leads off the discussion around the new developments that intermediate and advanced organizations are doing around data ops, which is to say, you've got to identify the roles that need to collaborate to kind of really get the value out of your data and analytics. This is not just something that you throw data scientists at. This is something that you need to kind of create a collaborative team for. And I'm going to talk a lot about data ops. I just want to mention that this is something that's evolving for a couple of reasons. To enable different roles to work together in a specifically prescribed way in order to work in an agile way to generate more innovative insights, to apply the insights from data and analytics to your organization, and innovate in an agile and rapid way without shooting yourself in the foot regarding data governance. A key aspect of data ops is it's not just about having teams be capable of deriving insights and applying to the business faster, but doing it in a sustainable, safe way. So part of this, just like where it came from in DevOps, the notion is getting the developers, and in this case, the data engineers and data scientists and the business subject matter experts working with operations folks to make sure that we're not breaking any processes, but also baked into this is a lot of data governance, data quality watchdogs to kind of make sure you're doing stuff in a sustainable way that'll be, you're not going to break any rules around compliance and those sorts of things. When I look at our maturity models around where people are in terms of where they're maturity, we ask them, to what degree are you using agile practices in your data architecture, in your data implementation and production of data products? The folks who came out as advanced were better than intermediate, and intermediate better than beginner in terms of they're expanding the use of agile practices within all these things related to data. So it's something that's catching on with the folks who are not only figuring out what are the components they need in terms of both technology and roles and processes to make data real and to provide insights, but to do this in a regular way, in an iterative way to kind of drive innovation. This is just a quick picture of a lot to say here about data ops. I mean, the thing to recognize here is on the left side, you've got the roles who are kicking things off. You have to have the business lead. You have to have a designer. Think product design here. This is not something just for data engineers and data scientists. To do great things with data requires people who understand what business problem you're trying to solve and understand things like product design, product development, and product management. So you've got the data engineers and the architects and the data scientists working with product managers, designers, and business leads. In the middle, you've got that data ops thing. That's where the data stuff is going on. And you've got the data engineers building data pipelines, passing them off to the data scientists. Across the board, you understand where the data is coming from. You got the lineage. The governance is baked in to the tools people are using. And kind of then it goes out to the DevOps folks who actually implement the final product. I mean, there's a lot to be said about this. The bottom line is there are a lot of roles here, and the notion is everybody's got their own area of expertise, and the whole point of all these changed processes and roles is to make sure you're not only kind of providing value to the business and providing innovation, but you're doing it in a sustainable, safe way with the governance baked in. Basically, you're curating data at two levels. The same historic level, which has always been around repositories of trusted authoritative data, right? Master data management, single source of truth. You got to know where that basic customer and product and location data is, but also curation at the level of specific digital products. When you're designing a product that's a data-oriented and insights-oriented product, what data is best for that? So there's curation going on at that, which really ups the game around what we mean by data governance and data quality. And it's a product management mindset. Really, you're producing data products or analytics products, and you're going to get a product definition of things like product owners and product managers for this. And the data in these cases are curated for specific stakeholders or customers, internal or external, specific use cases, and those products are designed for those specific use cases. That's the value of that product mindset. You're thinking, what do these people care about, and what would actually make their life better? So I'm going to talk quickly about data governance maturity levels. This is another wordy slide. There's operational levels, which we could call coded data governance and project data governance, which is really that original operational stuff that started with ETL and moved on to kind of data governance programs and into team data governance, where you actually have perhaps a chief data officer or center of excellence for data quality and start looking for decentralized participation by data stewards to kind of make data governance an enterprise-wide thing. These last two phases, strategic data governance and ambient data governance, are where things get really fairly advanced. At the strategic data governance level, you're starting to think about that whole data ops thing. If we're going to try to get more agile and we're going to try to produce more data products to make the company smarter and better, then we need to start baking data governance into the way we operate. And this needs to be, it's not just somebody else's job. Everybody needs to do this. And it has to be, the technology has to start really making this happen. A lot of machine learning behind the scenes, to help make this happen, a lot of automation to make this happen. And the ultimate state is what we refer to as ambient data governance. It's the goal state. It's a bit aspirational. We don't really know that many people who we could say are in this state. You're in this state for maybe a few attributes of your governance program. The idea here is technology fades into the background, and really the intelligence based into the everything that everybody touches kind of makes data governance happen. Data governance, data quality is baked into the tools people use to access the data, to look for data, to find data, and to use data. The policy are automated within tools so that you can just go get data. Data just works, and you can get it, do things with it, and you can collaborate with others and know what works for you, what works for them might work for you. And it becomes really kind of systemic in the tool sets to use. Nice to describe. I can imagine I can make it sound very attractive, very hard to achieve because you have to have all the people, process, and the technology in line to do that. And this is just a graphic that basically tries to show it's only that ambient data governance state that really frees you up from that the friction of actually data monetization, or just getting value out of data. It's even at that strategic data governance level, you still kind of have some friction in terms of being able to spend enough time finding those insights. You're still wrangling data to a certain extent. There's some difficulties along the way. That goal state of ambient data governance is the technology you have in place embodies the policies and the practices you have in place, and it just supports the ability to be extremely agile and to really free up the organization to find value in data. I won't get into this a lot. This is a way we kind of keep a scorecard. If we do a data governance maturity assessment, all those things around the outside are various attributes that we look at to assess, and we can score any one of those attributes at that operational governance level, strategic governance level, or ambient governance level. So you can see there's some check marks in that outer circle of light blue. We find people are doing certain things aligned with this notion of being an ambient governance, but it's seldom across the board. It's like here and there a few advanced places. So it's just a way we kind of keep score, lots of parameters, and we kind of think of it in terms of this operational approach, strategic approach, or are you even getting close to an ambient governance approach? So I'm pretty much at time. I just want to put this up and kind of talk a little bit about what we used in our 2021 Data Governance Solutions Wave. In a wave, when we're evaluating vendors, we look at their strategies and their current offering and their market presence. I think what's relevant for this discussion is, what do we ask vendors to tell us about in their current offering? That the blue categories are kind of higher level, medium kind of level categories of data discovery and access, and the lower level ones are the things we ask vendors specifically about. So in this data discovery and access, we ask about tell us what makes you a differentiator in how you acquire data, how you enable a business glossary, what's your data catalog like, how do you surface semantics, to what the extent can you acquire lineage characterizations and provide a visual. Data quality, we ask about quality profiling, monitoring, reporting, the support for data cleansing. In policy management, we ask specifically around policy development management, policy compliance monitoring and reporting, issue remediation and approval workflows. If you can't do the workflow within the product, then why are you using a data governance tool? Change impact analysis, and stewardship and management issues around roles and responsibilities. How much can you accommodate different roles in the organization? Data usage and collaboration is a really interesting one to talk about. To what extent can you monitor data usage? How can you look at how lineage is being analyzed and is being managed, and the collaboration across parties using the tool to kind of discuss things rather than having to get out of the tool and call somebody up and say, where did this data come from, right? Those old archaeological digs people used to do. And then advanced features around incorporating security, privacy, and compliance features, so that you don't have to have a separate security and compliance sort of tool set to take care of privacy and things like that. To what extent can you use the tool to enable data sharing outside the organization, or data commercialization to some extent, and understand the value of that? And then, just an overall discussion around data governance and management. So just kind of snapshot of where we think the data governance technology can do to enable you to do more advanced levels of data governance. In our mind, to be clear, we used to say that data governance is all about people, process, and politics. The fact is, you can't really get to those advanced states of data governance these days that we're talking about in the more mature sort of insights-driven business organization without extremely supportive, enabling, automated, machine learning-driven technology to kind of make that happen. So I think I'm 2 minutes over, Miles, and go talk about enabling the panel session.
Thank you. If the panel could show your video again, I will remove the spotlight from you, Gene, and then Brandon, if you can move us forward, that'd be great. So now we're going to dig in with Gene and a few more experts. Let me introduce our experts. So Phil Jones, heads data governance at Marks and Spencer. For those of you who are in the US, this is a major British multinational retailer headquartered in London. And Steve Jones and I have been friends for a number of years too. He's the chief data architect at Capgemini and has had a lot of executive roles there. I can't keep track of them all, but he's been a great person to collaborate with over the years. And so, Brandon, why don't we move the speaker slide off and we'll begin our discussion. Perfect. So I'm going to start with you, Steve. Give Gene just a moment to catch his breath. As we look at data governance, a lot of the legacy approaches have been around and their success rate hasn't been so high. So what's been the biggest holdback to success in terms of data governance?
Well, I mean, there's something I used to do when I did conference presentations on this like several years ago, which is, why does data governance fail? The answer is because the business doesn't care about data. And it always got the audience going, whoa. My point was, if they don't care about governance, if they don't care about quality, if they're not engaged with it, then they don't care about it. And that was really the point, was you need to explain, to the point that Gene started talking about ambient data governance. We're talking about the business taking ownership of data as a core part of organizationally how they work, understanding the value it gets. And one of the things of that, to me, has been the history is we've tried to govern all the data in a sort of a very, in IT, a very sort of black and white. I must have this. I was working on a program once where the standard IT process that we sort of inherited was every single attribute we get from every source system has to be mapped standard name with a standard quality rule. So I just downloaded the SAP schema and said, right, this is one system, guys. Apparently, in our data lake, we're going to map every single SAP field to a unique name for the company with a quality rule, and nobody cares. Nobody cares, because actually the business wanted the operational data. And the lights got out with Phil. So I think that's been the big piece. Is historically we've had these meetings, we've been offline. We've asked the business to turn up and they haven't turned up. And then we've been surprised when our data governance has ultimately sort of failed. I think the big difference now is that the reason I used to say data isn't important, because most decisions were made in spreadsheets, right? And extracts, what I call data rustling, right? People went and stole data from lots of places and did it. Now with AI, now with real time, and now with the importance of things like collaborative data ecosystems, and the building of businesses on data, it changes the meaning of data organizationally. And that's one of the things I think that we have to do in data governance, is recognize that data has value and how you express that and how you make people accountable who really create the data for its success. And one of the phrases, pieces I sort of talk around there is and don't sweat it. What I mean is that if somebody doesn't want to govern a piece of data because it's not important at a level that maybe in IT we think it is, just make it very, very visible that it is a business decision to have bad data in that space. And my experience is, if you give people visibly bad data, it's amazing how often they then turn around 2-3 months later and go, it's not IT's fault, it's my fault. Right, I understand now. Because previously you spent 2 years and then I hated it. So I think that's been a real change, is this business ownership and outcome.
I interviewed CFOs several years ago, and it was amazing that they did everything in spreadsheets, and it took them 3 months to close the books out almost. And I asked them why. Well, we don't trust any of the data, so we have to munge it in spreadsheets in order to make it work. So, I mean, it has to be better. Phil, what are you seeing? What's held back this from every company doing it well?
So, first of all, I'd agree with the points that Steve's made. He made them very articulately. My build on that is underestimating the scale of the behavioural and cultural change, which is sort of a segue from the points that Steve's made about the ownership bit. But that behavioral, that cultural change to support the governance program has to be there in order for it to be successful. And I think the way I would talk about that, that's a cultural change required across your organization for your colleagues, for your stakeholders to value and treat data to be an enterprise-wide asset to the organization and remove the silos. So Jean talked about siloed thinking. I've seen a number of instances of that. And a way of what we've positioned that within Marks and Spencer is trying to get people to view and value and treat data as an enterprise-wide asset in the same way that we talk about our physical products. So my example, the analogy I've used with many of my colleagues is that we're a food business, we're a clothing and home business. We sell strawberries, so we understand the imperative for the quality of our strawberries so that we can deliver the value that it's fit for purpose for our consumers, our customers. So we understand the provenance, the source of that data. We follow it through the supply chain. We make sure it's fit for purpose the way that we present that to our customers. You can see how the analogy is working here. And we manage the quality all the way through that life cycle. And it's making sure that we use that as a analogistic thinking to make people realize that actually we should be viewing data in very much the same way. And just to help build on this, up to around about 6 months ago, pretty much I read probably too much. I'm going to read the Forrester report when I can get my hands on it. So up to about 6 months ago, all the books I read were very much the hard components of data governance, data quality. So Dharma Dunbot, Robert Seiler's fantastic book on non-invasive data governance, stuff like that. Around about 6 months ago, I segued across to more around behavioral change and change management. So Jean mentions storytelling with data. Telling stories is a huge way of making this land with your business colleagues. Scott Taylor's got a fantastic book around that. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And there's my sort of closing remark on here is business leaders won't ask you to do data governance. They're going to ask for operational efficiency. They want to sell more stuff. They want to make more money. They want to have faster time to market. You need to demonstrate how your data governance efforts are going to help achieve their objectives, not your objectives, their objectives.
That's great. Jean, from the analyst lens, what's held companies back?
I'm sorry, what's held things back?
Yeah, what's held people back on really getting into data governance historically?
I think it's the comments around our business partners don't care. It's what I have seen. It's a really sharp edge when people have tried to sell the value of data and analytics, and the light bulb goes off. There's a remarkable shift from resistance. Just I wish IT would do this for me. I don't really care about it. To want to actually control everything. So, this notion, okay, let's talk about if you shouldn't be the center point of governance. You can be a center of excellence to some extent, but it needs to be distributed and federated, and the governance has to happen where the subject matter expertise is, because they really understand the data. Well, you don't actually have to do anything to make that happen. Once people see the value in it, they just want control of everything. They want control of data architecture. You have to actually start worrying about, just kind of going overboard with control. So that the trigger is really that getting people to see the value. So the data storytelling is important. Being able to, and that's why we have we publish these numbers on increased revenue, increased blah 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 based on, from advanced organizations. There's a lot of meat there in terms of showing that there's a serious business value in getting good at this stuff. And if you can tell the stories that show it's happened here, or if it hasn't happened here, it's happened in our industry, or it's happened elsewhere. If you can find a relevant story, that's fine. The best route to that is you can convince anybody in your organization to kind of play ball with you in terms of a little data pilot project, or a governance project, or an analytics project, and you get some real results. You can use that really easily to kind of convince you can use that to convince the next most likely convert, right? And so you don't have to just convince everybody at once that it's a good thing. You start building a groundswell of a realization of the value and interest, and they start hearing internal stories about those guys over there doubled their hit rate for sales contacts and stuff like that. People will start paying attention. So it's really that emotional thing is really the cultural thing is a really, really big deal. Yeah, there's a lot of things you need to do process-wise and role-wise and tool-wise, but that's just work. Everything else is the hearts and minds. That's the hard part.
So I'm going to start with Eugene on the next question because it's got a Forrester in it. And so let me read this next question. You know, one of the things we at Alation like to say is that data governance isn't a one and done. Forrester's done a lot of historical research on data, how data degrades over time. What does the research say, and what does it mean to data practitioners?
There's no question that it degrades over time. It just does. That's, I mean, basically entropy kind of rules basically over order. And you can, you know, how many times have you heard I've been, for those of us who've been around for a long time, we've been in organizations where, you know, they clean up all the junk out of their CRM, all, you know, they merged and acquired and they're redundant CRMs. And then when they got into one platform, there was all this horrible data and they spent a major effort cleaning it up. And saying, yes, it was a major 18-month effort to clean it up. It was a lot of work. And now we're cleaning everything we like to get out of the data. We're going to get out of the data only to find that 8 months later, it's a mess again. It's like it has to be part. I mean, that's just what happens. Behaviors change. That's why the data literacy programs are important. People mess up data without knowing they're doing it. They don't know, you know, they say, I don't have anything to do with data. Do you log, you know, customer interactions in Salesforce? Yes. Okay, then you're changing data. Are there rules around that? Is there any oversight? So there's no question that data degrades without governance being baked into the system, which is why that end state I talked about, ambient data governance, is instead of being a people process sort of thing, the more the tools you use can embody those rules and policies and make that happen. You don't have to call somebody up and slap them on the wrist verbally. You can just, you know, you got to make it happen in the systems that people use in order to kind of keep that steady state. And you know, have a constant improvement as opposed to constantly kind of degrading and worrying about things continually getting worse. It's hard, but I mean, it's really a matter of recognizing the value of the distributed subject matter experts who are the actors who are either making data better or worse and getting them involved and educated and to kind of act the right way to kind of make it all happen.
I got a new quote: entropy degrades out over order. A quote for y'all. So Steve, what are you seeing? How does data work? Is it degrade over time? Is it constantly something we have to be working with?
I mean, I think that the point that you made in terms of it's about how you make it organizational. It's about how you make it part of the culture. I'll tell you, this is a story from a decade ago, but a client called me up and was like, right, we've got this massive data problem on customer. It was bad shipping data, bad this, bad that, went down, and it was all the MDM team's fault. It was all the data governance team's fault. And I looked at it, and it was just weird. Their problem was weird. You look through, and they had all of these duplicates, and they kept having duplicates. And when I was having lunch with the head of sales, and we're just chatting on some stuff and things like that, and they started moaning at me about their sales. They were, oh God, we've got this thing where if you have a new customer, you get like a higher commission than if it's an existing customer, so everybody's out there chasing new leads. And I just thought, well, hang on a second, that's a bit weird in the industry they're in, which I won't say because like, they can't have that many new customers. Because what we were finding on the MDM and governance side was they weren't, and they were merging them back. And what we basically found was that it took a month or so to get them merged through, by which point salespeople had their commission calculated. So what they were doing was creating a record for a new customer, which was actually an existing customer, but different. So all we did was change the rule that said, okay, you get 50% of your commission for a new customer in the first month, and you get the other 50% in the second month if it's really a new customer. We started having no new customers because the sales guys realized, they'll find out before I get the second part, so I won't get my money. And I think that was one of the pieces that's a simple story, but it's really the piece to us is looking about how organizationally people care about data. Another very quick story, I worked with a large manufacturer and they had a problem with lead times. The first run lead times were completely wrong. And I just went and spoke to a few people, and what we found was that there was a mandatory field in SAP. The engineering guys were the first people to enter this data. They didn't know what the lead time was. They didn't care what the lead time was. So they basically just tapped in a random piece of information and hit send. All we did to change it was we defaulted it to 9, and they did it in hours, which is part of the problem. But we just defaulted it to 9,999 years. So if everybody did a manufacturing piece and said, "Oh, this is going to take 20,000 years to manufacture," they knew it had some bad data in it. and they could go and fix it. So I think part of the piece of the what Gene said about the cultural pieces, it has to be continual. And it's really finding those moments in the organization and the motivations and the mechanisms via which you can make good systemic, because it's very easy to make bad systemic.
We've got so many questions. I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to come to Phil on our third question. We'll get the answers to that, and then we'll start answering some of the questions people are asking, because we've got 13 questions and multiple in the chat. So, Phil, when you look at data governance, what's the importance of being able to continuously improve, to automate, and then to actually judge the end-to-end performance that you're getting? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. Thank you. Thank you, Miles. So I think the point around continual improvement, our entire data governance framework is very much based on continuous improvement. There's a great book I've read recently about Think Again, where you make some hypotheses at the start of doing something. You build up enough knowledge so that you can then try apply that, and then a test and learn approach. And then you need to reflect on, did it work? Did it actually work as per expectation? And think again and see what changes you can try and make. And part of that within Marks and Spencer is we're recognizing that it's not a one size fits all approach. So what may work in our foods division may not easily and readily transfer across to our clothing and home. And thank you, Adam Grant, that's the author. Thank you, whoever said that. It's not a one size fits all. You need to be able to work out what's the level of maturity of thinking, what's the key problems. And the thing that we've adopted in M&S is, our overall governance approach is to think big, but we're starting small, allowing the changes to ripple out, and we're building for longevity. I think you also talked about the automation element, and you have to make data governance and data quality scalable. Trying to do that manually is a non-starter. So we proved that fairly early on by trying to do some elements of data quality assessment on a manual basis, and it took so long to do. We almost forgot the question by the time we reached the answer, and by which time that the question had matured, it changed. So we've implemented a data quality tool alongside Alation, and we're building out these what we call repeatable patterns of quality rules that we can then rapidly apply those to different use cases as we spot them, and come up with answers an awful lot faster with that ongoing measurement, the workflow and stuff. And then the final bit, and I think this is quite a tricky one to get right, is the performance measurement. So it's a truism that what gets measured gets managed. You need to think about the behaviors that you're trying to influence to give the right metrics, to give actionable insight. So we've split it into a set of operational metrics that essentially says how we're standing up our data governance operating model. So where we're building out these data stewardship, data ownership communities. And we've got a set of KPIs to track the governance activities. So Gene talked about the curation of stuff. That's a governance activity. So how are we progressing with the curation of tables, glossary terms, articles, and stuff on Alation? And then critically, the business outcomes that you're achieving. So what value are you returning to your organization as a consequence of doing great things around data governance and quality? What risks are you remediating? And if you're not providing demonstrable improvements, you're at risk of losing your support.
Cool. Steve, could you go after this question? Then I'll let Gene kind of share his knowledge.
Well, I think to sort of build on what Bill said is the narrative, the storytelling, the engagement that people you need to get in. That's all of this. Right, is that's what this is about. I mean, there was one of the questions there, just pulling out another bit, which was asking about gamification. Making those stories real, those narratives real, and I'll give you two examples. Is one, I was working with a retailer, and everybody knows out of stock at a retailer. Phil will know out of stock, but you might like this one. Is what I did out of stock is a really hard metric to track to say whether it impacted sales. Because you're out of stock, but you don't necessarily know whether it led to a non-sale, because they might have bought something else, they might not have bought that, and it might not be popular. So what I did is I flipped it round and said, okay, how many things have you sold that you said weren't in stock? And we found that about 1% of this organization's sales were of stock that their system said they didn't have, which led to the joke of the head of retail was, this is a fantastic new business model. We're just going to sell stuff we don't have in stock. But their point is that they understood and they were able to very easily track that as a way of understanding it, right? The insanity that 1% of your sales are of things you say you don't have. So how are you forecasting inventories? How are you forecasting stock movements when 1% of what you're selling is stuff that you believe you don't have? And another one, working with an oil major where we were able to demonstrate that because they hadn't governed certain pieces, they might have to shut down an oil rig because of a certain very important but tiny product. They couldn't prove that between one barrel of these parts in the warehouse and another barrel that they were the same part because they were for different oil rigs, even though they were absolutely the same part. So I don't know if it sort of answers the question, but I think bringing it back to business stories and narratives that you can't deny. The head of retail could not deny that selling 1% of stuff that they don't have is a bit insane. And it was actually a bit more than that, so I won't say, just in case somebody works out who it was. And the second one is on the oil platform. It was very clear to the board, listen, this tiny little part, that if this bin goes empty, we have millions of this part in the warehouse, but I have to shut down the oil rig because I can't prove that what's in that bin is the same as what's in that bin because we don't run data governance from that perspective. So to me, bringing up those things into the KPI gamification question as well is making that gamification business real. And from my view, business so obvious I can't deny it. And that is how we make data just alive, because you can't argue with those pieces. Another one, just the last one once, was to the risk point that's been raised a few times with GDPR is I work with a bank where basically if certain things hadn't been done, the CFO was at risk of going to prison. It's amazing how powerful in a meeting when somebody says, well, it's going to be a lot of effort to do that. And you just go, brilliant. Can you just email the CFO and say you want to go to prison? Because just need you to do that. And it changed it. One of our KPIs on that project was actually, has the CFO gone to prison? Answer, no. Well, we definitely have made the compliance pieces. It was a very powerful, visceral thing for me as to why we were doing the KYC, money laundering, et cetera, things within the bank.
You're on mute, Miles.
Don't mute.
Gene, why don't you give your quick answer and I'll do a quick follow-up on some of the questions we've got so that we can get a couple of those answered.
Sure. I mean, the quick answer, I just agree with everything Steve said, and we have folks who, in various areas at research in Forrester talking about. We always get questions about KPIs, so we try to write research about what are the KPIs to watch. For me, the more generic the KPIs are, the less anybody really cares about them. But the people who really care intensely about the numbers that represent progress on some kind of business activity, big progress, whether it's it might be something like doing some predictive analysis to understand how the alternatives to your supply chain. So, and then then the KPI that really matters is next time there's serious disruption to your supply chain, how fast were you able to switch? In a more mundane way, looking at things about improvements in marketing campaigns, improvement in customer acquisition, or those kind of things. I think the KPIs, the data used, that instead of saying this data set is 68% clean, what's much more interesting is we did these things with these data and analytics products, and we had 110% better click-through rates on blah blah blah. I mean, those are the ones that people care about, and so it's how you can't be generic about them, but you can get the individual business people who care about the outcomes engaged with those KPIs, and that's what you really want. You're winning the hearts and minds, and just more activity at that level.
So a couple questions I just want to get after. There will be a follow-up email that will go out to you after this. And what we'll do is provide links to the recording and a link to the slides. One of the things I'm going to ask Gene to do, just because there was a lot of questions clarifying concepts that Forrester and other analysts have come up with. So if you could just recommend and provide a link to us, just send me an email on this. I'll get it out to everybody. People are asking, how does data ops relate to ML ops and AI ops and those things? And then they're also asking about these concepts of data mesh and data fabric. if you could just recommend a couple of Forrester pieces to dig in on that, we'll share that with folks so that they can clarify that in their thinking.
Sounds good.
You went after the data KPI thing. I think maybe the most meaningful thing to do in the last 7 minutes of this discussion is the question that really popped out to me is about how do you drive a data culture? And so, Phil, you're right in the middle of that. How do you get people to really grapple the value of data and to get behind it?
It's a pivotal question. We've invested a lot of effort within Marks and Spencer to both generate what we're calling our academy, our data academy, to do some formal training around a data fellowship to equip people with appropriate skill set on how to use Power BI type capabilities, building up to more of an ML ops type capability. And we've got a number of different groups of people heading through that. And actually, there's a really important part of that, making sure once they've concluded that training, they can actually apply it. Otherwise, you've got this great appetite to do something with that huge amount of information, knowledge, nothing to apply it to. Equally, from that data literacy cultural change, is we've had something we've called reverse mentoring with our senior leadership team, where we've had people, similar people like me, who we've been buddied up with individuals at a very senior level to essentially demystify some of the concepts about data and to put them in a safe place where they can ask questions about, what is reference data, what's master data, what's, I don't understand, is it the same thing? And it softens, it narrows those barriers and helps them to first of all appreciate some and take some of the language out of it to make it more accessible, and also then to help equip them with what's the right questions for them to be asking of their data. And valuing the governance that comes alongside this to make sure that the data is fit for their purpose. But that I'm going to use some Robert Siner quotes. Data doesn't govern itself. Data quality doesn't happen just because you want it to. And data doesn't define itself. So they need to appreciate there's an investment of people's time and energies in order to make this happen. Okay.
Yeah, that's really good. I did a fun piece a few years ago called The CEO's Guide to Data, tried to update them from their MBA book. Not all of them went through MBAs, of course, but I tried to. Steve, what's your sense? How do you help the organizations build a data culture?
I'm going to, I think, completely agree with what Phil said. I'm actually going to add something. It's the other side of it a bit, which is fear. And what I mean by that is AI, data ecosystems, and external collaboration. If you think you have a problem governing data internally, you're going to have to start collaborating externally with your partners, collaborating externally in pieces. If you look at the Apple Health business, that's a $100 billion business built on an app and data sharing. If you can't govern your data internally, you're going to be excluded from that market. We've done some research that basically says you have twice the market capitalization if you can do that. McKinsey have forecast it's going to be 30% of global revenue by 2025. So there's a business fear here, which is if you can't do this, you're going to be excluded from 30% of the market. This is like being in 1998 and deciding to not have a website, right? Data is a business driver, and that's the fear. So I completely agree with Phil on the positives, and this is what you need to do. But absolutely, you should be making the business aware. I can share another report as well in the link. This fact that data is what all business value is now being built upon. That's the business problem. And if you can't govern it, you can't build a data business. So that's the negative side of, but the reason why, unlike when I used to say the business doesn't care about data, today CEOs and boards are talking about data. The only question is whether the rest of the organization is aligned to that vision. It's not a CIO problem anymore. And
take us home, Gene. What's your thought?
Combination of what Phil and Steve said. I mean, right on. I mean, we wrote a piece a few years ago with our first piece about what an insights business insights-driven business is. And at that point, we didn't have the data. We're just saying, here, what Steve was just describing is going to happen, and other people who are getting good at this will eat your lunch, period. And now we have the data just showing it. I mean, that's how I use the maturity data to show, look, you know what, people are moving from beginner to intermediate. That means if you're just getting started, you just hired a chief data officer, you're just getting started, you are seriously behind the curve. People will be doing things and out competing you now, and it's going to take you a couple of years to catch up. Can you afford to be behind for a couple of years? I mean, if you really got to get moving now. So it's the message to the remaining beginners is, I hope you are beginning because you started last year and you're still in the beginner state, because if you haven't really gotten going on this stuff yet, you're in trouble. I love the idea that if it's 1998 and you're deciding not to build a website, that's perfect. That will bring it home to everybody in a big way. I mean, I think, and to get into what Phil was saying, I think my short answer to what he was describing of all those positive things is the way to instill a data culture is explicitly. You can't just do a bunch of things and hope things get better and hope people will get on board. You've got to drive that culture. You've got to measure the culture. You got to do that gamification thing that people are talking about, and do surveys to see where people's attitudes are. And it's got to be very explicit. It's so hard to change cultures. You can't really let it be a subtle thing. It's got to be pretty explicit.
I want to first off thank all of our panelists, and for Gene for giving a really compelling talk. Gene, I don't know if you saw how many people responded so positively to the presentation you give, but it's the kind of feedback and involvement we've had in this presentation has been extraordinary for me. I want to remind everybody, and thank you for coming, that we have 3 more of these data dialogues coming up. My goal is to make them as compelling as this one. But again, I want to thank immensely Phil, Steve, and Gene for being with us today. This has been an absolutely great discussion.
Thanks for having us, Miles. It's fun.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.